Well, hey, folks. Here we are, day 3. What we've done is some slab construction. We've done some coil construction. Now we want to get kind of the last of our major components into place. The head and neck, and perhaps even the arms today. You've had a few extra days to get your sketches to me so that I have an idea of what you're planning on doing. But, after tomorrow, I'm not going to need your sketches because we really needed the sketches in preparation for this project. So get them to me tomorrow or it's too late. Here we go. Yesterday, we coiled up and in. And you can see I haven't completely finished blending everything. Mine's looking a little sloppy. But for demonstration purposes, I'll go ahead and move on to the next step. And that is the head and the neck that fit into this opening up top here. Alright, so I'm going to use some of my extra clay, except you know what, that's not nearly enough. You guys are going to be welcome to come up and get some more clay. You'll probably need to do that a couple times over in this process. When I cut down the clay for extra clay, I cut it down into some smaller pieces than before. You don't need like a giant slab like we started with. But again, anything extra you might want to keep wrapped up. I can use this little bit of extra from yesterday. I'm going to rip off some, and what we're going to do is we're going to roll a coil, and a coil is going to serve as the neck for our vessel, and it also serves as kind of a stem that holds the head in place. So kind of picture the head being held in place. With the coil, it's not going to be nearly as skinny as yesterday. I like to kind of start it off in my hand and get it going. Fingertip to wrist for a nice round coil. The coil we're going to use is going to be about the size of this opening right here, okay? A little bit smaller so that it can go in and out. I can tell that the coil I have right here, it's getting close to about the thickness that I want. It's way too long though. What we want it to be able to do is be able to sit in there, okay? But notice that if I use the neck that long, it will take up all the interior space in your vessel. So I am going to trim this down in a couple minutes, but right now it seems to fit pretty good in there. So I'll just set that to the side for a moment, and I'll grab some clay for the head. Now, the size and shape of your head, a lot of that is determined by your sketches. What was your idea? My figure, or I typically will start off with kind of an egg shape. To get an egg shape, I'm bopping and turning and bopping and turning the clay. I'm letting the clay kind of hit the heel of my palm so that it's got more of a tapered bottom to it, sort of like a chin. And something else I'll typically do, I got kind of that egg shape now. I'm going to take it, just sort of bop it on the table. When I do that, notice it creates kind of an angle on the back. I'm going to use that angle to my advantage. I'm going to go back to that neck. It doesn't have to be nearly this long, so I'm just going to cut off some from the bottom. And I'm going to cut up here towards the top, but I'm going to cut it at an angle. I'm trying to match the same angle that I have on the back of the head. Notice that the neck is now a lot shorter, but that's going to be sufficient. That's about all we're going to need. These two are going to come together, okay? Now, clay, when it's wet, can be pretty misleading because this is holding into place, but when the clay dries, this will easily fall apart. So remember, anytime you have two major pieces of clay, the two things you should always do is score the surface. You're creating a lot more surface area for the clay to latch onto itself. And then after I score both surfaces, I'm going to put some slip in between. And slip sort of serves as the glue or the mortar in between. A little dab of slip will do it. And then I'm going to match these two angles and mash that clay together. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a neck massage. Oh yeah, yeah, it's the good stuff. If you can't reach underneath the chin or the neck, use a tool. Now, one thing about working with clay, you always run the risk, when these things go into the kiln, there's always a risk of things exploding. It's a very small risk, but we're going to do things to ensure that we don't have any explosions in the kiln. Really, one of the only things that can cause one of the few things that can cause an explosion in the kiln is when the clay is just way too thick. That head, for example, that's a big old spicy meatball, okay? That's a lot of clay, and it's way too thick. Doesn't matter how dry it looks on the outside, it could still have moisture trapped on the inside. And when those water molecules start to agitate and boil under the heat of the kiln, that's when this whole thing could go. So one thing I want you to do when you first make your head, we're going to add a hole, a ventilation hole. From the very base of the neck, I'm going to shove this chopstick up into the brain, okay? So this stick is going all the way deep into the head here, and that way moisture has a way to escape and air has a way to get in there. And you know what? Just by pushing that stick in there, help mash these two pieces together a little bit better. So, my head is in place. I suppose the only other thing that you might have time for today, we talked a little bit about making the arms. And the arms and the positioning of the arms, again, that's one of those things that you should have shown me in your sketches. So, when I make an arm, I'll just do one. I'm not going to do both right now. When I make an arm, again, it's basically a coil, except there's a fly in here. I can't understand why a fly middle of October is in my room. Anyway, I'm going to start this off as a coil again. When I roll this coil, though, I'm putting a little bit of extra pressure. I'm just putting more pressure on one side as opposed to the other. I'm still trying to do fingertip to wrist, fingertip to wrist. The reason I'm putting pressure on one side as opposed to evenly across the whole coil is I'm trying to make this more like a, I don't know, it's like a club or a baseball bat. Just like our arm, a little bit thicker up towards the top, thinner towards the wrist. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. And, I'm going to go ahead and force an elbow right into there. Remember, elbows come to a nice distinctive point. The other thing I could do with this, and I like to do right now, is take my clay and maybe just pinch the very end where the wrist would be, and I'm actually starting to create or form up the beginnings of a hand. I usually create what I call like a Michigan hand or a mitten hand to start off with. I'm just going to make a little incision in the clay. If I pick it up, I can kind of form a thumb, and we've got the beginnings of fourth fingers, so something sort of like this, all right? Michigan type hand. All right, so when we go to add this arm, make sure we add it right up by where your shoulders would be, close to the head, okay? Sometimes I see people add the arms way down here and it's nightmarish, okay? So, obviously before I attach two major pieces of clay, the two things we should do, score and slip. So, don't be afraid to really texturize that, give it a lot of surface area, both areas where they're going to attach. And you know what, while I finish up this arm, I'll just put it on here temporarily, and I'll, after I turn off this video, kind of finish it up properly. Tomorrow is when we're going to get into the good stuff. We're going to start talking about the inclusion of facial features, the development of character and personality, clothing design. We're going to build all that stuff. So, you know, the goal for today was to get everybody's basics into play, okay? I guess we'll probably talk again tomorrow. See ya.